They called it a distress signal. To me, it sounded like a heartbeat trapped in stone. We crossed a cobalt desert at dawn. The maps named this place Thaymn Dune. Wind wrote and erased lines in the sand, as if the moon could not keep a thought. Ahead of us lay a buried warship. Locals called it the Vulture King. Black alloy ribs rose from the dune like the bones of a giant that never learned to sleep. The signal pulsed in 9 steady notes. On my slate, the pattern curled like a spiral. It felt less like a location and more like a memory that wanted company. My name is rewrote Well. Outsiders call my people anomalies from dead worlds. Some call us death's enigma. We were made to burn in battle. I taught myself to breathe. We entered the wreck with lamps low. The corridors hummed like a throat in the dark. Sometimes our footsteps echoed twice. Once from our boots, once from something that moved beside us. We passed a shrine hammered from scrap. Cloth charms from the glassed clan hung like faded seaweed. A braid of red wire marked the Queln weavers. A streak of red dust meant salt bloods had come here and left without answers. Deeper in, we found a round chamber covered in old star carvings. I call it the Spiral Vault. At the center waited a cradle of cables. Inside the cradle lay a scabbard of dark red metal. No blade. Only the sheath. I touched it with 2 fingers. The 9 notes stopped. Silence pressed against my ears. Then I heard a whisper that used my voice. It said the word finally. I kept that to myself. On the way out, the ship warmed around us. Doors that had been shut opened a breath before we reached them. Other doors closed, as if the wreck wished to keep us for later. Dust rose on the horizon. Armored crawlers crossed the flats in a long line. Marshal Cade Oryx sent an open order across every channel. His voice reached us, warped by his walking fortress and its engines. He claimed the relic by imperial law. He promised mercy for obedience. He promised nothing for refusal. I looked up and saw a thin red arc in the sky. It looked like an aurora, drawn with a careful hand. It curved like a bowstring, pulled hard and held. The air around it grew still. The whisper inside the scabbard matched my breathing. It told me to run. We moved at once. Compasses spun. Shadows lagged behind our bodies by a finger of time. On the whole, 3 pale lamps woke in a line. They shone like stars cut from dusk and pinned to the sky. Helia Voss is our gravemancer. She watched the 3 lights and spoke into my come. Those are not lamps, she said. They are star positions. A map just turned itself on. The red arc pulsed again. I stepped toward its glow. For a moment, sound thinned to a thread. Dust hung in the air like slow stars. We passed through the breath between beats. Oryx lost our track. He paused, as if a ghost had crossed his path. Back in Sable Anchorage, the crater port filled with rumor. Clans drifted in and stared at the scabbard at my hip. Some eyes wanted a fight. Some eyes wanted a future. At Triskel Ridge, 3 stone spires reached into a clear sky. I set the scabbard in the dust and felt the red arc calm. The 3 lights from the wreck seemed to join by a faint line. It matched the spiral on the vault walls. A warning became a key. Oryx spoke again over every screen and wall. Food and walls, if I obeyed. Punishment, if I refused. His fortress walked along the far rim and cast a long shadow across the crater. The whisper in the scabbard spoke in my voice once more. It told me to bring it home. I knew that home did not mean a place. It meant a purpose. I looked at the clans. I looked at the families who would bleed first. I looked at the skiffs that would carry their children if we ran. I looked at the warlord who thought mercy was a bargain. My kind were built to rage. I chose to breathe. A hairline seam glowed along the inner band of the scabbard. It looked like a circuit that wanted to close. The sky answered with a soft red pulse. The wreck answered with 3 bright stars. Do you want victory, or do you want the world to survive it? The scabbard felt cold against my hip. Each breath weighed more than the last. The whisper inside it kept quiet. Silence can be a kind of pressure. We went back into the buried warship to plant trackers. We needed a map that did not lie. The corridors had changed again. A handrail sat a finger higher than yesterday. A stair landed half a beat closer. It felt like the wreck had moved in its sleep to meet our stride. Edric Shale brushed dust from a seam and listened with his glove. Ships do not breathe, he said. Murmur Theta tilted its head and answered softly. The architecture sings, it wants you deeper. We reached the data spine. Dead conduits lined the hall like ribs. Helia Voss cleared frost from a core shard and woke a flicker on the wall. Not letters. A single glyph, a crown shape, thin as light on water. It faded and left my stomach tight. A siren climbed the metal like a scream. Breach on bulkhead 9. Marshal Cade Oryx had begun to cut through the hull. His voice rolled over open channels in a warped tone that came from his walking fortress. Stand down, he said. Surrender state war materiel. Mercy for obedience. Nothing for refusal. We heard drills bite into steel. Troopers stacked in the corridor ahead. Refugees pressed behind us. Angles narrowed. TimeNarrowed.com. I set my hand on the scabbard and did not draw. Not yet. I pictured what a draw would cost. The memory bill. The bead of light. My mother teaching a tune when my hands would not stop shaking. I made myself breathe to 12. One more count. One more. The drills punched through. Muzzles flashed white. We were pinned. I drew the blade only an inch. The world opened along a seam I could not see. Sound thinned to a thread. Dust hung between ground and air. 2 copies of the same corridor spread side by side. 2 battles. 1 me. The old voice inside the steel moved through my bones. 3 to bleed. 2 to bind. 1 to choose. The canticle count? In the left copy I slipped behind the breach team. Boots touched deck like drops in thick honey. Edric slid a panel. Helia lifted a crystalline core that pulsed with a deep blue beat. She whispered its name. Gravchoir Shard. A record of a black hole singing. Murmur Theta sang a low line to the walls. The corridor pulled tight and began to knit over the wound. In the right copy, the flats burned on my visor. Darrow Morn held a bending line. Talon Priya skimmed low and dragged dust across enemy sights. There was no clean win there. Only a slow retreat that saved bodies and gave up ground. The blade hummed in my grip as if it could sell me perfection. I have learned what perfection costs. One chose, win clean inside. Lose wisely outside. I sheathed the blade. Time slammed shut. 2 corridors fused back into one. Troopers stumbled and dropped their aim. The seam at bulkhead 9 looked sealed, as if it had never been opened. Helia held the shard against her chest, like a small star. On the flats, Darrow stood bruised and breathing. Talon's skiff limped and still flew. Alive was enough. Back at the skiff, Darrow tried our oldest joke. The one we use when a bad plan barely works. It should have opened a door in my head. It opened nothing. Helia scanned my wrist with a reader. A tiny bead of light clung to the skin. Photonic condensate. Memory with weight. She said it was the receipt the world leaves when a piece of you has been spent. We watched it evaporate into the air. "What did it take?" she asked. I did not answer. The truth sat like a stone in my chest. On the way out, the ship changed shape for us again. A door opened a breath before we reached it. Another refused, as if the wreck wished to keep us. We stepped into the dusk at Sable Anchorage, and the sky answered with a thin red arc. The red parabola lifted like a bowstring, drawn and held. For an instant, a crown shape glimmered inside the red seam. 3 small points. 2 faint lines. 1 rule I could feel in my pulse. 3, 2, 1. The whisper in the scabbard returned. Perfect outcomes cost imperfect pieces. I closed my hand and breathed to 12. Maybe perfection is not worth the price, I said. Would you trade a memory to keep strangers alive? Would you keep your past and let them fall? To threats. 1 heartbeat. From the roof of Sable Anchorage, Helia Voss traced danger on her slate. Inside the buried warship, a breach team drilled the spine. Out on the Ferric Flats, armor columns closed like a scissor. They wanted us divided. So we divided with intention. Interior team with me. Helia Voss, Edric Shale, Murmur Theta. Exterior team with Darrow Morn. Talon Priya and clan skiffs covering the line. Anchor coins ready. 12 breaths on my count. No third draw. The Vulture King had changed again. A railing sat a finger higher. A step landed half a beat closer. It felt like the wreck adjusted itself to our stride. Like a living building, learning our feet. At the spine deck, Edric raised his hand for silence. A diamond drill chewed through bulkhead 9. Metal dust fell like slow gray snow. Behind the plate, a crystal pulsed with a deep blue beat. Helia named it with a whisper. Grav Choir Shard. A record of a black hole singing. The drill punched through. Shock troopers spilled into the corridor. White muzzle flashes stuttered in the dark. My cum cracked open to Darrow on the flats. We will not hold without help, he said. 2 fronts. 1, me. I set my hand on the scabbard. I felt the cost, waiting like a coin in my mouth. Then I drew the blade. Only an inch. The world opened along a seam I could not see. Sound thinned to a wire. Dust hung between ground and air. 2 copies of the same corridor bloomed side by side. 2 battles. 1 body. The old voice inside the steel moved through my bones. 3 to bleed. 2 to bind. 1 to choose. The canticle count. Copy 1. Inside the ship, I slid behind the breach team. Footfalls landed like drops in thick honey. Edric unlatched the panel. Helia lifted the singing crystal. Murmur Theta sang a low line to the walls. The corridor pulled tight and began to knit over the torn seam. Copy 2. Out on the flats, the air burned with tracers and dust. Darrow's line bent but did not break. Talon skimmed low and dragged a sheet of sand across enemy sights. There was no clean wind there. Only a retreat that saved bodies and gave up ground 1 beacon at a time. The blade hummed as if it could sell me perfection. I have learned what perfection costs. 1 chose wind clean inside. Lose wisely outside. I sheathed the blade. Time slammed shut. The 2 corridors fused back into 1. Troopers stumbled and dropped their aim. The seam at bulkhead 9 looked sealed as if it had never opened. Helia pressed the shard to her chest like a small star. Out on the flats, Darrow stood bruised and breathing. Talon's skiff limped and still flew. Alive was enough. Then I asked myself the quiet question that will not leave. What if enough is a story we tell to hide the bill? At field triage, Darrow tried a grin that did not reach his eyes. He asked if that had been a plan or a miracle. I tugged my sleeve and saw it. A new scar over my heart. A fine, raised spiral like a tiny galaxy pressed into skin. Darrow touched his own chest and froze. He had the same spiral. He had never been cut. Murmur Theta traced both scars with careful fingers. It said the topology was shared. It said the corridor had remembered us as one body. It said living architecture leaves marks when it learns you. I thought of halls that breathe. I thought of a world that is a house. In the command cradle of his walking fortress, Marshal Cade Oryx watched the footage. He replayed the instant the sealed seam appeared where his drill had just been. He asked his engineer the same question twice. Why does the wound look healed? Why does the wound look healed? No answer pleased him. Night lifted over the crater. The red parabola arced across the sky like a bowstring drawn and held. I held the anchor coin and breathed to 12. Not rage. Discipline. Enough for today. A promise to pay what tomorrow asks. The whisper in the scabbard sounded almost kind. You are learning to lose beautifully. Maybe, I said. I would rather learn to survive honestly. Would you take a clean win in one place if it meant a deliberate loss somewhere else? We held court in dust. Sable anchorage drew a ring in the crater floor. Chalk over packed sand. Torches along the rim. Clans gathered until the air felt crowded with old stories. The glassed war veils the color of smoke. Queln weavers let wire ornaments click when they breathed. Salt bloods painted their cheeks with red earth. Every eye watched the scabbard at my hip. Chieftain Sira Nyx raised a shard of black stone. She spoke the moon right. No armor, no tech. No mercy. Duel for the relic. Winner takes the blade. The crowd liked the shape of that story. It was easy to cheer. I stepped into the ring. I breathed to 12. I asked if the story could end without a funeral. Boos came fast. Laughter came after. I stayed where I was and drew 3 circles with the chalk. I marked 12 small lines. I said we would try a different law. I called it the Rage Index. I spoke simple rules. You win by control. You win by breath. You win by knowing when to stop. Your heart stays under the line. Your strikes prove restraint. You do not break bone. The ring went quiet. A law does not feel like a law until it lives inside a body. Sira Nyx looked at the chalk and looked at me. She said, "Prove it." The first champion stepped forward. A Queln weaver. Bronze mask, heavy stance, and careful feet. He wanted to break me on the first exchange. We touched hands. I set the count in my chest. 12 breaths. He lunged with power and purpose. I turned his line and let the strike pass. My open palm tapped his shoulder where the harm would have landed. I showed the crowd the cost they did not have to pay. He pressed harder. I slowed more. On breath 8, I had the inside line. I crossed the scabbard at his wrists. I let him rise without injury. Boos rolled once. Then a hush settled. Murmur Theta sang a low note in the dust light. A chalk line shifted by a finger width. It looked like the ground made room for discipline. The second challenger was Saltblood. He came laughing, not rage. Reckless joy. He smeared fresh red earth across his chest and asked if I could index that . He attacked like a storm. I stepped back when my body wanted to step forward. I let him choose the pace until he ran out of space to be careless. On breath 12, his swing opened too wide. I took his balance and set him on one knee. No pain. No break. The joy in his face faded into respect. Silence held. Then the ring breathed out as one. Bright streaks stabbed the sand near my feet. Shots from the rooftops. They wanted the crowd to believe I had cheated. Talon Priya skimmed the rim and threw dust over the rails. Heliavos read the angles from the shadow lines. Darrowmorn dragged the spotters down by the collars and stood them in the ring. Sira Nyx lifted the black stone high. By clan law, she said, the old right stands. By clan law, the rage index stands. 2 laws in 1 ring. Choose your story. The clans struck spearbutts into the sand. That sound, said the law, now lived in them. On the rim, the walking fortress of Marshal Cade Oryx shifted its weight. Banners hung like dark tongues. His voice reached us distorted by engines. He offered food and walls, if I obeyed. He offered nothing if I refused. He watched without blinking, like a hunter who wants night to fall. We cleaned the ring as stars came out. Wind moved along the crater wall. I felt the red parabola rising behind the ridge and matching my count. Helia took my elbow and told me I had turned discipline into ritual. I told her rage is easy. I told her I want hard. Sira Nyx pressed the chalk into my palm. Keep teaching, she said. We will keep breathing. I looked at the families on the stairs. I looked at the fighters who did not bleed today. I looked at the scabbard that waited for a moment of weakness. I breathed to 12 and let the new law settle in my bones. We did not win a trophy. We won a way to live. Would you keep both laws in the same ring if it meant fewer graves? Would you choose breath over blood when the crowd asks for blood? The sky burned with math. 5 dark wells turned above Thaymn Dune. Each one felt like a fist closing on our moon. Engines whispered in the high air. Sand trembled under our boots. Heliavos watched from the ramparts. She said the pattern was a grav-lensing net. 3 volleys, if they were patient. 2, if they wanted to teach fear. Crater Plaza filled with people and breath. Families lined up between stone rows, bundles at their feet, hands locked together. They did not ask for promises. They asked for a path. Sira Nyx took my arm. Give us a way out, she said. I told her I would try. At Dock 6, a familiar laugh cut the noise. Keshrul swung a boot onto her skiff and grinned up at me. Old dust on the hull, old dare in her eyes. She asked if I still liked impossible exits. I told her yes, and I meant it. She flipped a coin in the air and let it vanish. The trick we used to run in alleys for food money. 2 sides. 1 story. My throat hurt in a way that had nothing to do with dust. On the skiff roof, Helia chalked lines on metal. Breath count. Draw length. Aurora cadence. She spoke plain so everyone could follow. Think of the red parabola as a ribbon, she said. We will fold that ribbon along our breathing. Hold the fold and walk the crease. Murmur Theta hummed a low note and tested the air. The architecture will obey a song, it said. But a song is only as strong as the breath that sings it. Marshal Cade Oryx spoke across every wall. His voice came to us warped by the engines of his walking fortress. Surrender the relic. Food and shelter for obedience. Nothing for refusal. I closed the channel. Darrowmorn handed anchor coins to the ferry captains. When the world feels wrong, he said. Stare at the coin and breathe to 12. I climbed Triskel Ridge. The red parabola woke like a careful scar across the sky. Helia counted us in. I set my feet. I opened my lungs. I drew the blade. Only halfway. Sound narrowed to a thread. Dust slowed like snow in warm water. The red parabola fattened into a corridor. A red seam arced from the crater to the flats. Talon Priya called from the lead skiff. Window open. Move now. Skiffs surged into the seam. Lines of families followed. Faces lit with the color of rescue. Feet found a path that did not exist a heartbeat before. Outside the corridor, the first volley fell. Black flowers opened in slow curtains at the horizon. Shock fronts slid along the red seam like rain on glass. They broke in empty badlands. The flotilla adapted. Gravity lances reached down to kink the corridor. Helia listened to my breath and adjusted the count. Up to beats. Hold down 1, now. I obeyed. The fold held. The ribbon flowed. The parabola precessed like light bent around a hidden mass. Murmur's song stitched the edges tight. Edric Shale called positions in a steady voice. Darrow moved the rear like a patient tide. Kesh led the first fairies. She turned once in the red and touched 2 fingers to her brow. The old sign that meant survive, then brag. The world hiccuped. A minute skipped. I felt it pass like a swallowed stone. No one screamed, no one fell. I kept the draw. We crossed. On the far flats, the seam closed clean. The sky exhaled. People counted children and names. Alive is a kind of music. I looked for The roster said present. The crowd said made it. The place she should have stood held only wind. The coin lay warm in my palm. I did not remember how I got it back. Helia wiped grit from her face and looked up at the turning wells. Lensing does not bend like that without a sleeping gravity well under us, she said. Murmur Theta tilted its head and listened to a note I could not hear. The world is singing in a low register, it said. In his fortress, Oryx reviewed the telemetry. He did not smile. Prepare the black hole rounds, he said. Forbidden munitions. Gravity wrapped like wire around a bullet. If she plays with time, we will play with weight. We made a habit at the edge of the flats. Helia scanned my skin for the condensate ledger. A bead of liquid light clung to my wrist. Memory with weight. We watched it evaporate. Paid, she said. Small, but paid. Night walked down the crater walls. I stood where the corridor had been. The air held the ghost of a seam. The scabbard warmed against my hip. Mercy purchased, the whisper said. Bill pending. I breathed to 12 and counted faces instead of debts. The red parabola pulsed once behind thin cloud. It looked like a heart behind glass. This is the price of elegant math. We fold the ribbon and carry strangers over the drop. We pay in minutes. We pay in names. Would you open the perfect path for strangers if it cost a piece of your past? Would you keep your memories and let them fall? Pre-dawn at Triskel Ridge. 3 stone spires and a cobalt sky. Cold air and a silence that felt like a held breath. I sat with the scabbard across my knees. The old coin warmed my palm. One question beat in my chest. How many pieces of me are left to spend? I drew the blade a finger. Not more than that. The world stopped breathing. Wind froze, mid-whisper. Starlight thickened like slow honey. Footprints I had just made paused between one grain and the next. A voice stepped out of the seam between seconds. The Severant, it said, come and see. The sky unrolled like a scroll. I saw a milk-white star boil like fruit in a pot. A figure floated above it in armor older than maps. He carved the star with a blade like mine. Flares turned to ribbons and went dark. Whole fleets folded under the math of one cut. They called him the Unmaker. He turned his face toward me. It was not a helm. It was a living diadem. Roots of bone climbed a skull. Gold fire moved in veins that were once skin. Conquest is mercy, he said. He flicked his wrist. A city below did not explode. It simply did not exist anymore. Edited out of its own past, as if it had been a mistake. The vision changed. A ledger hung in the dark. 2 columns. Victories on one side, costs on the other. Every perfect outcome was balanced by something stolen. An hour, a name, a face in a small kitchen, a lullaby given once to stop a child from shaking. Drops of liquid light fell from the ledger. Photonic condensate. Memory with weight. They touched nothing and still were gone. The severant moved in my bones like a low chord. Perfection has a price, it said. You are already paying it. Another vision rose. A world that was a house. A hollow sphere wrapped around a captive star. Miles of corridor. Forests grown from pale bone. Oceans made of memory that broke into light on silver shores. The Unmaker circled it with his fleet. Inside, hallways shifted to meet his blade. The walls sang in a language made of angles. He called it mercy to spare them. He sealed them in. Billions. The house of endless echoes. Salt touched my mouth. I do not remember crying. I thought of spiral scars. I thought of living architecture that learns your footsteps and leaves marks. The seam in the air trembled. The voice softened. Let me sequence you, it said. Blade in your hand. Crown on your brow. House at your back. No child dies. No friend vanishes. You win every battle and never pay again. For a heartbeat, I saw myself. A crown of bone steel took root in my skull. Gold light filled my eyes. Legions rose like a tide that never tires. My chest did not rise. I stood victorious and not alive. Another sound pushed in from far away. A man praying with his teeth together. Marshal Cade Oryx knelt in the chapel of his walking fortress. Palms pressed to a field altar built from spent cartridges. He said, if she is a god, then I will become a storm. His crews rolled out black hole rounds. They timed them to the cadence of the red parabola. Say yes, the Severan said. I closed my eyes. I remembered a tin bird in a child's hand. I remembered the old coin, still warm from a friend I could not find in any crowd. I remembered a ring of chalk where rage learned how to stop. I sheathed the blade. The visions collapsed. Sound returned like a tide. Birds were late to a world that had paused without them. If victory kills who we are, it is not victory, I said. The blade hummed in a way that felt hungry. A hairline crack crept along the inner band of the scabbard. Thin golden filaments flashed inside the metal. They moved like veins searching for a circuit to close. Not just a mystery. A warning. Behind me, Helia Voss stopped mid-step. Her head tilted as if she listened to weather. That is not wind, she said. That is a well singing. A low hymn trembled across the dunes. 3 voices braided into one. A pulse like hammered bell. A deep down well. A thin carrier tone that threaded every breath. Blade. Crown. House. The canticle count made into a song. I slid the coin into my pocket. I counted a slow 12. I taught my pulse to be a metronome and not a drum. The red parabola stirred above the ridge. A faint red seemed like a careful smile from something that does not know humor. Oryx is bringing gravity. The Severant is bringing promises. And the house is already dreaming. Would you accept immortality and perfect outcomes if it meant you were no longer alive inside them? Verdun pit at noon. Heat shook the air. A narrow road clung to a cliff that wanted to fall. Helia Voss read the seismics and did not smile. Glassquake, she said. 60 seconds. The refugee line pressed close to the rock. Mothers with bundles. Elders with canes cut from broken antennae. A child held a tin bird like it could hold the sky up. Darrow Morn scanned the path. "We can shove half across if we start now," he said. "Half is not enough." The scabbard lay cold against my hip. The whisper inside it waited. It wanted me to ask for help. Murmur, Theta, listened to the canyon wall. "Stone will obey a song," it said. "But a song is a promise. Promises have teeth." The first crack sang through the cut bank. Dust shook loose in thin sheets. High above us, the red parabola smudged the sky like a warning. Sometimes choices shrink. Sometimes they vanish. I set my boots on the edge and spoke into the quiet inside the scabbard. "Take the price from me." "Not from them." I drew the blade. Only a breath. Only enough. The world hushed. Shouts thinned to silk. Dust paused between ground and air. The cliff that wanted to break unshattered along a red seam. A corridor inked itself across open space. "Window open," Talon Priya called. "Move now." Darrow turned the column into a river. Syrah, Nyx, and the wardens lifted the weak. Feet found a path that had not existed a heartbeat before. Murmur, Theta sang a low lattice. The canyon obeyed. Its facets held like ribs under a steady hand. Helia Voss matched my breathing to the count. Up 2 beats. Down 1. Now. The corridor tightened. The parabola steadied. We wrote a bridge with discipline and law. A woman stumbled. The tin bird slipped from the child and skittered toward the drop. I stepped without thinking. I caught the toy. I put it back in a shaking hand. The child stared with coin-bright eyes. I nodded and kept breathing. On the far side, the ground returned like a blessing. I sheathed. Sound rushed back. The corridor sighed into nothing. The cliff remembered gravity only after the last pair of feet cleared the edge. Silence held. Then the cheer that breaks your ribs from the inside. We kept a ritual after every draw. Helia called it the condensate ledger. She scanned my skin for the bead of light. It clung to my wrist. Photonic condensate. Memory with weight. We watched it evaporate in the heat. "What did it take?" she asked. I tried to hum the tune my mother gave me when my hands would not stop shaking. The one I used in the ring when the crowd roared too loud. No sound came. "A lullaby," I said. Murmur, Theta closed its many eyes. "Mercy written too often becomes a cage," it said. "Ritual can be a door you lock or a door you walk through." Across the pit, the banners of Marshal Cade Oryx stirred on the walking fortress. He watched our impossible bridge through tinted glass. His strategist spoke low at his shoulder. "Sir, black hole rounds will stress the lattice and the well beneath the desert. We may crack the basin and bury our own men." Oryx did not look away. "Prepare them," he said. Then he paused, for the first time I had ever heard him pause. "Hold until I give the count." The red parabola pulsed behind thin cloud. It looked like a heart behind dark glass. Darrow Morn tried our oldest joke to steady me. It should have opened a door in my head. It opened nothing. I breathed to 12 and counted faces instead of debts. The child with the tin bird raised it toward the sky as if showing the world its small sun. I raised my hand back and tried not to hear the silence where a song should be. The whisper in the scabbard slid along my breath. Not kind, not proud. It sounded like a hand tapping the bill on a table. "Mercy purchased," it said. "Pay again soon." I rubbed my wrist until the last ghost of light was gone. We saved everyone. I spent something only I will miss. Helia set a chalk mark on my forearm. 1 thin line added to 4. Cutting law. We breathe. We count. We leave a seam. We remember the price. On the far rim, Oryx's fortress took one slow step. Engines pushed heat into the air like a held breath. He did not fire. Not yet. The storm he is building will not care which songs I cannot sing. But we are learning how to make laws strong enough to hold a bridge in the air. We can bend without breaking if we stand inside the count. Would you open the perfect path for strangers if the price was a piece of your past you can never get back? Morning haze over verdant pit. Refuge camps quiet for the first time in days. Not safe, only quiet. Thin contrails crossed the sky at wrong angles. Helia Voss watched them and frowned. Those are gravity spears, she said. Next comes a net. We needed rules before the storm. In the field forge at Sable Anchorage, I set 4 brass coins on a scarred table. Anchor tokens. Each coin held a tiny spiral like a small galaxy. Darrow Morn, Talon Priya, Sira Nix, clan wardens. Everyone leaned in. Everyone listened. Law 1. Cut only on an anchor count. 12 breaths. We keep time so the world can keep shape. Example: when panic hit the plaza we counted, and the stampede did not start. Law 2. No third draw within 60 breaths. Rage wins fast. Discipline wins alive. Example: 2 draws saved a street. A third would have torn the roof from the homes on it. Law 3. Never cut near places where time already runs thin. Do not bleed one wound to sew another. Example: a seam left open over a memory pool will swallow the names of the people you just saved. Law 4. Resheath with a seam. Leave the world a line it can heal along. Example: a clean seam gave us a road where rubble would have been. The scabbard hummed in my hands like a throat remembering a song. It felt like it knew these laws from a life I have not lived. In the listening hut murmur, Theta cradled the crystalline core we took from the breach. The grave choir shard warmed and began to sing. 3 voices braided into one. A pulse like hammered bell, a deep down well, a thin carrier tone that threaded every breath. Helia named them softly. Blade, crown, house. Breathe with the hymn, she said. Place the cuts between the beats. We can bend without tearing. We took the lesson to the sand. Drills on the ferric flats. March, halt. Anchor count, reverse, halt. Talon skims the lanes. Darrow calls cadence. Clan captains learn a new religion of breathing. The sky answered with a tear. The first black hole round opened like a dark flower. The horizon bowed. Dust fountained up and down at once. A boy stumbled and slipped toward a cracked ledge. Anchor, Darrow barked. I drew the blade only a little. Sound tightened to a wire. I stepped between 2 beats of the hymn. I caught the collar and set the boy back on ground that remembered being ground. I sheathed on the exhale. A thin red seam winked and went out. Helia scanned my temple. A speck of liquid light clung to the skin. Memory with weight. We watched it evaporate. Paid, she said. Small, but paid. Sable's rooftops flashed. Someone lazed targets from laundry rails to guide the next barrage. We took them down in daylight so the whole plaza could see. Darrow dragged the spotters into the ring where we had drawn the rage index. Sira Nix read out clan law and cutting law. You broke breath and balance, she said. Penance by discipline. They ran the count in front of everyone until their lungs shook and their hands steadied. No blood. Only a lesson the body would not forget. In the quiet after, the old voice inside the steel purred in my bones. All your laws were mine once. I closed my fist around an anchor coin. Then this time, they are ours. Evening slipped into the crater. We tuned the choir lower. The hymn settled on our breath rate until it felt like the world was counting with us. And not against us. I checked the scabbard in the dark. Fresh hairline marks had risen along the inner band. 3 signs written in a script that looked like a crown. 3, 2, 1. The canticle count made into metal. Night brought a new shape. A lensing lattice assembled over Verdun pit. Oryx's drones wove a net out of gravity. Helia read the numbers, and her voice went flat. The next volley is not a test, she said. It is the siege. We climbed Triskel Ridge and faced the dark. Murmur Theta sang harmony in 3 parts. Darrow, Helia, Sarah, Talon, the clans. We all breathed to 12. 1 pulse held in many chests. The red parabola brightened on our exhale. It looked like a seam, waiting for a careful hand. Between the beats, a promise waited. We can bend without breaking. If we remember how to breathe. Would you follow laws that limit power if those laws are the only thing that let you survive using it? Night lowered a net of engines over Thaymn Dune. Oryx's drones stitched a lattice of gravity above Verdun pit. Cold geometry glittered like frost in the dark. Crater Plaza pressed flat to the stone rows. Faces down, hands over heads. Sierra Nix walked the lines and turned panic into counting. 12 breaths at a time. I climbed Triskel Ridge and set 3 anchor coins at my feet. Murmur Theta nested the grav choir shard in its coil. It began to sing. A pulse like Naira Queln, a deep down well. A thin carrier tone that threaded the air. Blade, crown, house. On my breath, I said, Darrow Morn, Helia Voss, Talon Priya. The clans. 1 cadence. Hold. The sky shivered. Volley 1 opened like a dark flower. Shock fronts rolled toward the crater. Taller than towers, hungry as old taxes. I drew long, sound narrowed to a wire. The red parabola thickened into a corridor. A red seam curved across the night. The blasts touched the seam and slipped along it. Force ran like rain on glass. Explosions broke in empty badlands. Sable anchorage still stood. Along the buried flank of the Vulture King, dead panels woke 1 by 1. 1, then 2. Then 3. 3 bright points burned above us like careful stars. Helia lifted her slate with both hands. Those are not lamps, she said. They are positions. Murmur sang into the hull, in a voice like a tuning fork. Old satellites turned like slow birds. Thin auroral threads linked the 3 lights. A pattern drew itself across the sky. I felt it in my ribs, the way a name arrives on the tongue. The address? Volley 2 came early. Oryx fired off the beat to catch me mid-inhale. Hold, Helia breathed. I held. Time strained. The scene trembled. Darrow set scrap charges in the empty basin and lit them. A fake collapse punched dust into the air. Oryx's targeting staggered. I exhaled on 12 and did not draw. The volley missed everything that mattered. On the ridge, the 3 lights finished their lines. Angles tagged themselves in my mind like quiet ink. Helia overlaid the sky on her chart and worked without blinking. Her voice softened. It is a route, she said. 2 thin jumps through the dark. It ends at a tamed singularity with a ring of monasteries. An old name surfaced like a coin in silt. Vesper Well. The abyssal choir. The scabbard warmed under my palm. A hairline crack along the inner band woke and glowed. Thin golden filaments moved like veins, seeking a mate. For a heartbeat, they arched into the shape of a small crown. Then they faded. 3, 2, 1. The canticle count, written in metal. Volley 3, built like a slow tide. The lattice brightened. The wells aligned. By the book, I said. Murmur held the high line of the hymn. Helia kept the pulse. Darrow kept the count. I drew only enough to bend the worst of it. We let the rest break on empty ground. No perfect outcomes. No bill we could not pay. Silence after thunder is its own kind of prayer. The clans rose from the stone rows and blinked grit from their eyes. Alive. We kept our ritual. Helia checked the condensate ledger on my skin. A small bead of light clung to my temple. Memory with weight. We watched it evaporate. Paid, she said. Small, but paid. In the command cradle of his walking fortress, Oryx watched the same sky. His strategist whispered that our pattern was a map. He did not argue. He only circled a point on his tactical glass and spoke in a calm voice. If she wants the choir, we get there first. I gathered the coins and pressed one into Helia's hand. We go at dawn, I said. Not as conquerors. As students. The whisper in the scabbard tried for charm and failed. Students become masters if they survive the lesson. I breathed to 12 and let the wind take the line away. We have the address now. We have a promise to keep. Bend without breaking. If your enemy traces the same map you do you race them to the answer or change the question? Space is not empty. It is a throat that sometimes sings. At Vesper Well, the song has weight. We took the thin lanes at dawn. Talon Priya flew dark. Darrow Morn watched the threatboard. Helia Voss counted for the jump core. Murmur Theta held a quiet note like a thread through cloth. I kept the scabbard steady against my hip and tried not to think about the price. The lanes were knife quiet. Stars stretched like wire. Twice I thought I saw a faint red seam blink in the dark, as if time had remembered us and looked back. 2 jumps. Then the sky opened like a pupil. Vesper Well, a tame singularity inside a ring of monasteries, white ribs around a black heart. The light at the rim never set. Our hull creaked like an old door in slow wind. The moment we crossed the boundary, we heard it. A hymn. 3 voices braided into one. A pulse like hammered bell. A deep down well. A thin carrier tone that threaded every breath. Blade. Crown. House. Docking lanterns lit a slow path. A small skiff met us, painted saffron and gray. No guns. Only calm. Welcome to the Abyssal Choir, the pilot said. Breathe with us or not at all. On the ring, the air smelled like ozone and old stone. Monks in woven fiber moved like tidewater. They wore no crowns and carried no blades. They listened. A line of scripture hung above the arch. Breathe or break. Bind or burn. Leave a seam. Helia spoke for us. We came to study the grave choir. We came to match breath to beat. We came to learn how to bend without breaking. The elder's cheeks were mapped with pale stars. He nodded once. You may listen, he said. Know this. The well does not lie. Hold your breath against it, and it will hold you forever. The scabbard cooled, and then burned cold. Thin golden filaments stirred along the inner band, as if roots were testing stone. We followed the elder through a colonnade into a chamber of dark glass. Beneath our feet hung the singularity. A midnight eye without a lid. Above us, the ring adjusted itself in tiny chimes. Each click felt like a rule written in air. The choir began in full. Low at first. Then the 3 voices rose through our bones. Darrow's jaw tightened. Talon forgot to blink. Helia's eyes filled with numbers and fear and joy in the same breath. Murmur Theta sang back. 1 note and then 2. It found the spaces between the beats. The scabbard moved on its own, only a hair. A small tug toward the rail, as if a leash had pulled inside my ribs. In the glass, I saw a reflection that was not mine. A figure wearing bone steel on the brow, eyes like banked gold under ice. Still as a statue that remembers how to stand for centuries. The crown of Hollow Kings was not a story. It was a promise with teeth. Oryx arrived like an argument held too long. His walking fortress translated in, across the ring. Lensing nodes glittered along its flanks. He tried to speak across the well. His words bent around the throat of gravity and came out thin. "This is neutral sanctum," the elder said. "Speak softly, or the well will—" Oryx paused, then measured his voice. "By imperial ordinance," he said. The elder raised his palm. "By older ordinance," he replied. "Breath is law here." We descended into the reliquary nave. Ribs arched over pools of quiet light. Relics floated in slow fields. Blade shards. Broken helms. Lattice of bone armor plates that seemed to grow as we watched. When my shadow crossed a field, the plates turned a little. Like flowers following a sun. The scabbard thrummed in answer. A line of script rose along the inner band. 3, 2, 1. The canticle count, written in metal. The golden filaments brightened and searched for a circuit to close. A voice pressed against the inside of my skull. It was not the severant. It was cold and clean and without anger. "One breath," it said. "Then you do not need to breathe again. No pain. No fear. No loss." I gripped the rail until my hand ached. Helia touched my shoulder and said my name. "I am here," I answered. The cold voice receded, the way tide withdraws from stone. "There will be a later," it implied. "There is always a later for the invincible." On the dock, the fortress held outside the accord line. Oryx could not fire without the well replying. He wanted me to step past sanctuary and make it simple. I did not oblige. We kept our ritual. Helia checked the condensate ledger on my skin. No bead, this time. The well had taken nothing. Or it was waiting to ask.com. The elder bowed once. "Listen as long as you can," he said. "Leave before you forget how." I looked at the dark heart and counted to 12. The filaments dimmed inside the scabbard. Not gone. Waiting. Blade. Crown. House. 3 voices in one song. The address had brought us here. The second voice was awake.com. We came to bend without breaking. We will see if the crown agrees. Would you wear armor? That makes you invincible, if it also steals the part of you that needs to breathe.